All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome. It's Wednesday night. Uh, we have squeaking sounds in the background from Lou. She is delighted to be a participant on this evening's stream. You probably won't see her, but she is right behind me. Yes, she is behind me, playing on the background with a squeaky toy. And so, yeah, we've got her delightful accompaniment with us tonight. Description. Hi, I'm Shay. I am a white, non binary, trans mask ish human with dark, well, like medium brown hair that's cut close on the sides and is in corkscrew curls on the top. Today's variation in black tank tops features a mesh upper panel where you can see that I have a rainbow binder on underneath. That is today's autistic fashion choice. Um, where to start? Last Sunday's stream was an interesting time at the end. Really glad to see that it's reaching more viewers, but at the same time, that was not exactly an okay way to interact in this space. We've changed some moderation rules. We have some moderation. Folks now are not going to be able to comment right away as soon as they join, asking for them to watch for a bit, get a sense of the vibe and what we're about here before jumping in. Like curiosity and questions, totally valid. Asking, like saying that you're going to pray for someone's disabilities to be cured, not so okay in this space. We don't believe that disability is a bad thing here. It just is. Like, bodies are bodies and brains are brains, and there's nothing that we can do about them. They're going to do what they're going to do. And we just accept that. And we work with the bodies and brains that we have because that's all that we can do. And so things that go against that are not so welcome here in this space. I'm not going to be shy about using the kick and ban buttons because I believe that they are there for a reason and that they should be used. So that's kind of just an update. I saw that on YouTube. Hey, Fool Injection, no worries. We got started a little late and I'm still doing my intro spiel. So welcome. Have fun. Glad to see you here. The things that come out of my mouth first thing. My goodness. Yeah. Someone made a comment on the YouTube videos that was like quite long and was attempting to offer all kinds of helpful advice. I'm going to just sort of say outright that I've been living as a disabled person for a very, very long time. Chances are good, if there is a solution that will work for me personally, I've already thought of it and considered it. Attempting to help me out is not really appreciated and not what this space is for. The odd time I do happen to miss something that might make my life easier or better, but that's not that frequent. And usually there's a pretty good reason why something that might work for somebody else might not work in my particular set of circumstances. And I will delete comments where folks are attempting to be helpful when they don't have all of the information. Yeah, just setting some ground rules. They're important. Yeah. Wanting this to like be a space where we can have deeper conversations where we don't have to get so lost in the weeds of things that people always say. So that means to a certain degree having to ignore the things that people always say so that we can get deeper into the conversation than we might otherwise be able to. Yeah, so that was the like rar sad face part of today's episode. I'm trying to think, how has this week been for folks? I am exhausted. It has been a really, like, it's been a good week. Good things have been happening. I'm excited about so many things, some of them that I can talk about, some of them that I can't. Um, there's really cool stuff going on in my life. We're prepping to put in a pitch for a pitch competition by Friday. We have the video pitch finished. We're working on the pitch documents now. Very excited. Um, that's one that I can say. That's about the extent to which I can talk about it, but it's very exciting. It's a project that we've been working on for a really long time. Um, we were talking about, the team and I were talking about it today. It's been in development for over a year now to get it to this stage. And I'm really excited about where it's come in all of this time, from a little baby idea that got a lot of interest to like a fully formed plan for what we're doing and where we're going. Fuel Injection says, I've been having a good week so far. I have work tomorrow though, and I'm not looking forward to it. I hear you. I don't even start that early tomorrow. Like tomorrow I start at noon, like is my first meeting. And I'm still like, oh, that's so hard. Why capitalism? That's gonna be my motto for this week. Why capitalism? And Fuel Injection says, sounds exciting though. Things are a happening. Things are a happening. Like every meeting is just like projects that I'm so excited about. The other thing is that like we got to see, first thing this week we got back the rough cut of the video that we made for the Pushmakers Town Hall. And it is stunning. It's so good. I'm so excited. We're working now towards a final cut and then a trailer for social media, which should be up and out like next week. Super exciting. Super exciting. Follow stuff on the gram. It's coming. It'll be there. I will try to use it for just more than show announcements. I hate social media so much. It's so hard. I say, as the other thing that I have to do tomorrow is finish prepping so many social media posts for ready for access so that folks can just post things for me. Because I do not like doing it. So I get to spend a lot of my day tomorrow in Canva. Hooray! Gotta love Canva. Fuel Injections is 9:30 a.m. for my shift. Also, why capitalism? Yes. Why capitalism, indeed. Gaming things. We finished Jenny LeClue last night. Well, it ended abruptly. I had seen that that much of spoilers made it through before I finished it. And I will agree with folks who said that it ended abruptly. I can see where people were asking if there is a sequel. I hope so. I hope so. Full Injection says social media is like sometimes a necessary evil. Otherwise, I'd eat it out the window. Yes. A necessary evil is basically exactly how I would describe it as well. We need it. It is useful for sharing information. It is... I really respect people who like make their living through content creation because it is such hard work, and the fact that like there now is such an expectation of professional content that goes out on social media platforms, like for organizations, for individuals, like it is so much work to put together even short reels. Like Paulina, sorry, like Willem and I are putting together like some dance practice reel from our trip to the botanical garden, and it's probably gonna be 4 or 5 hours of editing work. Like, I mean, yeah, probably about that for 18 minutes of footage shot from 2 angles to get like the pieces of it that can be reels. Like, it's absurd. And like, of course, like we want to share what we're doing. We're excited about the stuff that we're practicing, but the amount of work that it takes to just like put small bits of content out there, and the fact that that's like considered to be casual sharing sometimes, like for real, people who do that as their full-time gig, like there is so much under recognized work in producing short form content. Heath. Anyway, so before we got like totally sidetracked with all kinds of really fascinating and interesting conversation about what it actually is like to be disabled in public, there was actually a narrative arc that I was trying to develop that we never got to. And I really wanted to actually go back and tell the story of the actual pieces of being disabled in public, not all of the logistics stuff, all of the planning stuff, which I think we also often don't talk about. Someone had talked about in the comment that I had deleted, they had said, come on, brain. Oh, they had said that they felt unclear about what I was suggesting in terms of disabled people's access to public space and in terms of balancing between like green areas and spaces that people could access. And I wanted to clarify that before we moved into the other piece. And Full Injection says, I learned some video editing at university, and yes, can confirm it's so involved, lol. Yep. Very, very involved. I think that, like, we forget that disabled people are exactly the same as non-disabled people in so many ways. Like, disabled people want to be in nature. Disabled people can want to be in nature while also agreeing that conservation is important. So certainly don't take me sitting here saying that it's not cool to have 10 acres of a lilac conservatory and have no way for disabled people to access that entire 10 acres of property, with me saying that we should mow down 6 of the 10 acres so that disabled people can have access to it. But I think that we don't ever think that disabled people want access to these spaces, that disabled people could be interested in nature or flowers or hiking. So we don't build pathways that they can use. And then because they can't use the pathways, it reinforces that disabled people don't want access to those spaces and that disabled people don't like to be in those spaces. And I think that one of the really tricky things too that we have to think about in terms of space is not just, what is the typical use of that space, but also what are all of the ways that different communities are going to eventually use that space. Like, this is what I was talking about in terms of the botanical garden itself, where we found spaces that we could play in, where there was enough space for 2 of us to move as wheelchair users. And this is the important thing, right? Like, we're both wheelchair users. And this is where it gets complicated, because when people think access, they think accessibility for like 1 wheelchair user or maybe 2 wheelchair users at most. When you go into a theater and they're like, we have accessible seating, if it's fixed seating, like typically that's around like 4 to like maybe 8 seats at most for a disabled person to use a wheelchair accessible seat in a theater. And can you imagine that if you have some sort of performance that actually features wheelchair using performers or disabled performers, that perhaps maybe more than 8 disabled people at a time might want to come and see that show. And so when I think about the botanical gardens, I think about it knowing that absolutely it's the kind of space that they animate with public performance. And so what does that mean about the types of performances that they imagine being on that space? Who are they imagining being the performers? Who are they imagining being the audience? And so often those numbers, if disabled people are considered at all, are frequently considered in like such small numbers that massively underestimate how many disabled people there actually are. And this is part of what I was trying to talk about in terms of like saying that the buses don't work for Wheelam and I to go around in Niagara Falls. Like, we can't just park our car when we get there and get on the bus, because even though the buses are wheelchair accessible, a lot of the time buses are not designed to be wheelchair accessible for two people or for more than two people, or if we need to have, you know, multiple sets of wheels with us or multiple sets of mobility devices, right? Like, if I had a second wheelchair for outdoor access that was specifically designed for that, I can't take two wheelchairs onto the bus with me at the same time. Things are designed to be accessible, but they're not always designed to be accessible in the ways that disabled people actually use them, because they think that somehow disabled people have like different rules for how they use space than non-disabled people do. Or they imagine that disabled people always have an extra person with them to mediate it. And you can't be, you know, multiple wheelchair users going to do something together. That just breaks systems. If we were a dance team of 6 dancers, like, that's not even a high number, but to try and find wheelchair accessible transportation that could like work for 6 wheelchair users, even if we didn't all have to stay in our chairs, like, it wouldn't be a single vehicle. But if you just wanted to transport 6 non-wheelchair users, you can do that in a minivan. Like, that's what minivans are for. And I think that that's like the part of all of this that frustrates me so much, is that all of this is left to disabled people to figure out for themselves. And disabled people are the ones who are expected to do all of the research to figure out, well, what is the way that you can transport 6 wheelchair users when 3 of them need to travel in their chairs and 3 of them don't. That kind of a thing. Why do we always have to figure it out for literally everything that we do? And it's not about that everything needs to be paved, but it is about that when we're imagining public space that is for public use, we have an accurate idea of who the public is, and we design it so that that public can fully access it. And access it in all of the ways that we're imagining that space being used. I don't think that like it's so unreasonable to think that if you have a bench that is seated under the shade but off of the path, that a small footpath that leads to that bench is going to terribly like disturb the amenity or the natural quality of the park. You've already put a bench there. You're just making sure that everybody can get to it. We've got some stuff in the chat. So Fool Injection says, like, this just makes me think of like, you get bus trips of 20 or 30 people, right? The logistics of doing this, if you wanted to have 20 to 30 disabled people to go to an event, park, place, etc., you're right. It would just totally break under the logistics of it. Less the logistics of it, because there are services that are available that can fill the gap at the expense of it, right? Like, what does it cost to charter a single, 50, like here in North America, like a standard charter passenger bus is 55 seats. So what is the cost to charter that versus the cost to charter, let's say, your average wheelchair accessible vehicle? Let's say that we can double them up. One person stays in their chair, one person transfers. So you get 2 people per accessible van. That's 15 vans times whatever it costs to hire the van in the first place, which is probably comparable per hour to your motor coach, because it's roughly the same job. So you're paying 15 times the rate approximately to move those same 30 people. And then Wheelam adds, and do all of the research when the information isn't always easy to find. Case in point, the Niagara Parks website only having minimal accessible info. And then, like, let's be real about who the burden on information falls to, because again, that gets downloaded to the disabled person. And like, do people really think that I have time in my life to Google Maps and do like the intense photo like search of everything, to like everywhere that I want to go in my life? Like, oh my goodness, I would spend all of my life on Google. And I already spend a huge amount of time in my life on Google, figuring out if something is or isn't accessible, usually with very inaccurate pictures. Fuel Injection says, oh, totally. But like also, as you rightly said, once they get there, I would say places are rarely laid out or even equipped to accommodate 20 to 30 disabled people. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And adds on, as you said, sometimes even two wheelchair users is pushing it. In all honesty, like two wheelchair users traveling together with no one who is apparently in charge of them freaks people out. Like, they have no idea what to make of it. It's wild. Like, Wheelam and I go places, and like this is actually like where we're trying to take this conversation about disability in public, is that people, when they see adult active wheelchair users, don't know what to do about it. It breaks their brains. And it breaks their brains in ways that are often like hysterical, and also often really sad, and often potentially really dangerous. So it's complicated, but it is wild, the things that like you experience as a wheelchair user in public. Particularly when people aren't expecting to see you. Like, as a manual wheelchair user, you are on flat ground or going downhill. If you're an active wheelchair user, you're going faster than the foot traffic is around you. And people will sometimes have these like massive panic responses as you come towards them. You know that you have lots of space, that you're nowhere near hitting them, that like you've got like room to do what you need to do and just keep your speed, because you develop proprioception as a wheelchair user, and you know how to predict the flow of how people are moving around you and how to find the spaces so that you can move through. It's not that different from like weaving in traffic safely. I'm going to go with safely because I've seen a lot of motorcycles weaving in traffic very unsafely this week. But like safely weaving through traffic, it's the same skill with a wheelchair, and you learn how to find the holes and where to put yourself. But people sometimes like they'll see you and they'll like jump to the side and they'll scream, particularly if they're not like expecting you. You've done literally nothing wrong. You're existing in public, and they are jumping out of your way and screaming, and you're like, hi, top of the day to you too, ma'am. Like, I don't even know what you're supposed to do with that. And also, like, as a disabled person, you're not allowed to just, like, be idle in public. People really don't know what to do with that. Oh, Fuel Injection says we call those motorcyclist donors. I work in that industry. Sigh. It's shocking the level of ridership I've seen and heard about. Yeah, we saw like a few, because the trip from like where we are to Niagara Falls is like a couple of hours on the highway, particularly in traffic. Yeah, like both on the way there and on the way back, people who were like, the dotted line in between the cars is where the motorcycle should go. No, that is not where the motorcycle should go. The motorcycles should go in their own lane, please and thank you. Oh my goodness, I've totally lost track of where I was going with this. Oh yeah, that like being idle in public. Yes. Wheelchair users being idle in public. It is wild. Like, you just sit there and like it's a nice, like, so often, especially if I'm downtown, like I'm there in between appointments, or I get there early, or I have like something that's after, or it's just a nice day, or I'm meeting up with someone. And so I'm sitting somewhere out of the way on my phone, and people just are like, "Are you lost? Do you need help? Can I help you?" And I'm like, no. People will also often like think that you're panhandling in public just because you're disabled and you're sitting somewhere. It's not uncommon to like it's not unheard of to get handed money just sitting on the sidewalk minding your own business because people really like don't know what to make of a disabled person just being idle in public. Fuel injection says people freak out being idle in public, or Wheelum ads, or you just need to check your phone. Like, yup. It's. I don't get it. But like also too, like people help like the need to appear like hyper competent in public. Um, like one of the things that's really invisible about mobility device use is how skilled you have to be at using your device, and how being skilled at using your device is actually a defense mechanism. Being able to get through like mobility challenges quickly before somebody realizes that like there even is a challenge is honestly like the biggest protective factor in avoiding negative encounters in public. So like you get really good at opening heavy doors, and you get really good at being able to jump that like 1 inch gap that often exists between the sidewalk and getting into a door frame. And you learn how to use the door frame to pull yourself through so that you don't have to be seen as struggling in public. Because the second that you appear to be struggling, really dangerous things can happen. This Willem says, yep, especially the people rushing you from behind to help you up the ramp that you're already 90% of the way up. I was about to say that like ramps are one of the like biggest places where disabled people will often get like harassed and assaulted. Is somebody will see them going up a ramp, and like a ramp that's built to code is not that hard to get up, especially a ramp that's built to code that has like has a proper railing for you to pull yourself up. It's really not that difficult to get up a well-built ramp. There's challenges because not all of like so many ramps are not built to code. So many of them don't have railings to help you pull yourself up. So many of them are made out of materials that have degraded over time. There's a there's a ramp downtown where the building has two entrances, and you would think that the more accessible entrance is the one that has the ramp, but it's actually not. And you learn very quickly as a wheelchair user that that is a death ramp, and that if you want to access the building, you actually want to use the side entrance, which is, yes, more of the garbage entrance, but it is in fact actually the safe entrance into the building. Fuel injections is people pushing your chair must be super scary. I actually know someone who took the handles off their chair and put a very punk-esque looking studded strip at the back to literally discourage people trying to push them. So I have no back on my chair. I mean, like there's a tiny little bit of canvas that holds my bum in place, but like I'm a big person, and my bum is taller than my chair. And so there's no back to my chair. And people will still come up behind me, and they like not having chair for them to push does not deter them from not pushing you. They will still push you. They will still get mad at you for getting mad at them for pushing you when you did not ask for them to push you. Even having like spikes on the like on the push handles doesn't stop people. Disabled people have been using that trick for forever. Not for forever, but like that's one that's been around in the disability community for the last, I want to say close to 10 years now. That went viral for the very first time, and disabled people started doing it. It's helped a little bit. Like there have been like There's a, I don't know. Probably going to give credit to the wrong person. So I'm not going to try and give credit to whoever made the hashtag. But back in the day when Twitter was still Twitter, there was a hashtag called Just Ask, Don't Grab. And it was like disabled person after disabled person, sharing stories of being assaulted in public by people grabbing them when they didn't even like need or want or desire help. And like thousands of disabled people. Yeah. So, okay. I'll catch up in the chat. Fool Injection says, I actually didn't realize that was a thing. That's quite bad, to be fair. That needs to be a thing. And Wheelam says Dr. Amy Kavanagh started it, which was who I thought had started it. She's a blind academic in the UK who takes the train regularly. And it started with like a lot of her stories of how people would grab her traveling on the train to and from work. And it became a much larger hashtag with like thousands of disabled people sharing their stories. Fool Injection says, I think I've heard of her actually. Yeah, she's a really well-known disability academic and activist in the UK. So that would make sense. Yeah, like, and so much of the time, and Fool Injection says, I'm sure I've seen her on TV. Probably. She's great. Like, so much of the time I found too that like people wanting to help disabled people in public has nothing to do with whether or not the disabled person actually needs help, and has everything to do with how that person needs to view themselves as a helper in that moment in time. Like, you kind of get like two groups of people who help you. You have one group of people who like helping is actually about you, and you can say, no thanks, I'm fine, and they'll be like, great, just wanted to check in, and they'll let you refuse help, and that's great. Then you have the other group of people where helping you is actually about them and them needing to feel like they're a good person, and they will not listen to you when you say, hey, no, I don't want to be helped right now. That's actually going to do something that's going to hurt me or cause me pain. And they respond very badly, very badly. And that can get violent and dangerous very, very, very quickly. Fool Injection says, I was just going to say, do you think that people wanting to help are like trying to make themselves feel better out of some kind of personal guilt? I don't think that it's guilt. I think that it's like a few things, right? Like, I think that first of all, it's that we're not taught to view disabled people as whole people. So like our instinct upon like seeing a disabled person in public isn't the same as seeing a non-disabled person in public, where we would just be like, oh yes, fellow human existing in the universe. We're taught that like disabled people are like special and in need of protection and in need of help, and that things are hard for them, and that we should help them, and that helping them is a good thing to do. And so we get taught like all of this like stuff where we're holding on to like, oh yes, a pathway to being a better person is by helping people in need. Disabled people are in need, so if I help them, I'll be a better person. And it's not about guilt, but it's about an internal need that's about them. And that's like a really challenging thing to work around. Like when you're the target of someone who's trying to help you, and it's not about the help that you need, it's about their desire to be helpful. It can be really challenging to navigate that tension of how do you like tell someone no in a way that still honors that they're trying to be helpful when they're like doing something that's actively harmful to you in the moment, right? Like they're assaulting you and you're supposed to be nice to them so that their sense of ego and being a helpful person isn't attacked, but actually they're doing something really dangerous in that moment. And so like these are the typical encounters that disabled people have in public all the time, especially when they're by themselves. When there's two of us, it gets weirder, but sometimes less patronizing. I don't know. It's kind of like, it's weird. You get like a lot of like, are the two of you racing? Or like, one, two, three, go. Um, or like, and they're off. I mean, like, I've heard it all. Oh my God, I have heard it all. If I never hear it again, it will be one time too many. That is how often we get it. Like, disabled bodies are just like really considered to be public property. Like, people like don't think that you're a real person. Even when I wasn't a manual wheelchair user, I was using a mobility scooter, and like literally had like this guy come up to me in the middle of downtown Toronto out of nowhere, and like adjust my clothing from behind me without announcing himself, without saying what he was going to do, without asking me if I needed or wanted help. Came up behind me and adjusted my clothing and said to me, "Don't worry, I'm a nurse," because that was going to make that better. It was like, I don't care what you do. Am I like in acute medical distress here? Like, that is when you being a nurse is relevant to you touching me without my consent. Full injection says, what? Oh my God. Yeah, no, for real. For real, not making this up. In undergrad, was using a walker. Wheelam says, because, oh no, 2 to 3 inches of skin, the horror. Full injection says, like, I'm not your patient. F off. Like, I wasn't any, like, sure, downtown there are a lot of hospitals. I was not in any of them. You were not in a, like, this nurse was not in a place where he had any kind of medical authority. He literally just straight up assaulted a disabled person because his profession just normalizes dehumanizing disabled people. Okay, I will back up. That was a strong statement. But like, to be like real, like disabled, like you are taught in medicine to distance yourself and dehumanize your patients to a certain degree, right? Like, if there is something that needs to be done, they're a body that needs a thing done to. They're not a person with a whole life, because you literally can't be in the medical profession and understand like all of your patients as a whole human, because then it's too devastating when crap happens, and bodies are bodies and brains are brains, and none of those things are infallible. And so they do it as a protection mechanism. I'm not saying that it's not necessary or that it is bad in every set of circumstances, but not being able to flip that off when you are not in nurse mode, that's a problem. Um, Full injection says, I mean, I get the distancing thing from a mental health perspective, but wow. Yeah, like, there's a time and a place for it, right? And, like, certainly, like, you know, but, like, even in a medical setting, like, literally had, like, a lady in an MRI setting be, like, insistent upon undressing me. Like, never asked me if I needed help getting dressed or undressed. It was assumed that I needed help, that I needed her to undress me, and that I was incapable of dressing or undressing myself. I have no idea why she made that assumption. And I kept like explaining to her that I did not need this help, but eventually like there comes a point where it is easier to just like let somebody go ahead and do their nonsense than it is to be like, have you stopped to consider that you are literally forcibly undressing someone in their mid-30s who did not ask for or require your assistance to do so? They do not. They do, like, they are not trained, like they're thinking about a million other things in those moments, and they're not taught to like remember that someone is a human, and that like individual needs are probably different from whatever they've been taught to know about disabled people as a group. And like, look, if there's folks who are working in the medical profession watching this, like the intention is not to dunk on medical practitioners. Like, there are some amazing amazing disability informed and just like really phenomenal medical practitioners out there. You do not paint everyone with the same brush, but the unpredictability of what you're going to get in the medical profession, particularly when it's something as important and critical as your healthcare, is really incredibly frustrating at times on the like patient care side of it. But like all of that aside, there is no reason why a nurse should be using their profession somewhere where they are not working to justify putting hands on a disabled person. You are not safe if you have to justify why you're putting hands on somebody else. It doesn't matter what your profession is. Whew. So, all of that led to like some pretty serious conversations about what it meant to include disabled people in public art last week. Because that was what we were talking about. We were talking about a public art piece where predominant, like, no guarantees as to who the audience is because public art, absolutely, disabled people are likely, just as likely to show up to be a part of this art project as non-disabled people. But, you know, like not an explicitly disability art project in public art, springing a disabled person on the audience with no warning in like something where there's expected to be physical intimacy between performer and audience member because it's participatory, and having to talk about like actual safety planning for visibly disabled people, recognizing that like also too that like different cultures have really different understandings of what disability means in their culture. Like we saw even on the stream on Sunday where, you know, some cultures come in and immediately want to push cures on people. And like, yeah, like directly, like there are Catholic folks out there who believe that we can cure disability through prayer. And there are people from every culture out there who believe that we can cure disability through prayer. I mean, maybe not every, many cultures. There are many cultures where that is, you know, a thing, where disabled people get brought to, you know, shamans, or where disability is thought to be a mark of evil or a mark of, you know, having done something wrong in a previous life. There are also many cultures that believe that disability is just a natural part, you know, bodies are bodies, brains are brains, and that's okay. And people are, you know, cherished members of their community, regardless of what they do or don't bring to the table in terms of being able to produce or in terms of being able to participate. And so like really thinking through, like, if we're going to put someone in a position where someone might be surprised by a disabled person being in the role of performer in this public artwork, what are the pieces that you need to protect them? What are the encounters that might happen? What are all of the things that you really hope won't go wrong, but like, what might happen? What might happen when a disabled person is, you know, sitting on a sidewalk waiting to receive the person who's going to come and be in contact with them? What might happen if that person has some really negative ideas about what it means to be disabled or is afraid of disability? There are a lot of people out there who are genuinely afraid of disabled people and who will react with fear to visibly disabled people. I didn't actually think that it was a thing until I started seeing it myself, but it's wild. Like, people literally get scared. People get angry. People have all kinds of strange reactions because it reminds them of like how fragile their own health and their own bodies and brains are. And so like they have like the broadest spectrum of reactions. Which I think like gets to like why the interaction that we had at the Botanical Gardens was like such a like wild thing. So we're at the Botanical Gardens and we've set up in this like back road pathway that's also like a pedestrian walkway. People are walking there as well. And we set up 2 cameras that were like pretty like clear, that like it made it clear that there was filming going on, and in like a way where pretty much from every approach point people had quite a bit of like knowledge at the beginning that like they were walking into like us doing some filming work. And so this family came by, and I mean, a group of people that I assume to be a family came by, and they came over and they started talking to us, and the conversation was literally just like, "Hey, are we going to be in your film?" And we're like, "No, no, no, don't worry. Like, we'll edit you out. Like, you won't be in there. Like, nothing at all. Like, of course not. Like, we won't include you in it." But it just made us think so much about how much it took to have a normal encounter with non-disabled people in public. Like, that we had to be, not alone, that we had to look like we were actively occupied doing something. The activity that we were doing had to be easily identifiable. So much of the time, that's the problem in public. It's not that we're not doing something, it's that non-disabled people can't make sense of what we're doing. It's like, oh, I dropped the thing, so I have to move the thing off of my lap so that now I can bend down and pick up the thing that I dropped, because I can't bend down over top of the thing that's already on my lap. But they don't see that. Or they don't see, oh, well, I'm just waiting, like I've pushed the button and I'm just waiting for the button to open the door for me. They'll see, well, you're stopped and the door is closed, and they won't know that like the button, or that the door has already clicked or made the beep, or done whatever the thing is, flashed the green light, that I know that it's about to open and I just have to wait for it to open so that I can get through it. That's not what they're used to, and so that to them it's not legible. The fact that we were dancing and had cameras out on tripods made what we were doing legible. Made it an activity that they could recognize. We looked like we were competently doing what we were doing. We didn't look like we were going, oh no, how do we turn this thing on, and how do we set this up, and how do we dance together? We were, dancing. We were just doing it. I'm trying to remember, like the pathways that we take in public. A lot of the time movement goes in like really particular ways, especially when you're downtown in a city, and during rush hour, for example. Like anytime there's a crowd, the crowd is generally moving towards mass transit of one form or another. But if your pathway into the station is different than the walking people's pathways, trying to divert from that pathway causes people like anxiety and surprises people because your pathway is different. Whereas here it was like really recognizable because we were at a junction point of multiple pathways where people could see us, and our pathways that we could travel in were clear. And I just find it like really hard sometimes, like that when you're out in public and in the world, to have all of these things that you're keeping in mind about how other people are perceiving you in the world and how other people are going to intrude upon your experience in the world. And the other thing that like I just find hysterical is like when people like have no sense of like what is the times when wheelchair users like need help versus when they don't. Like the number of times that I've been out in the world and like something's been legitimately wrong with my wheelchair and nobody has even stopped to ask me if I'm okay. Like blown tubes or lost screws, or for a while one of the axle pins for my dance wheels doesn't lock into my chair for some reason, and I kept forgetting when I was switching into my dance wheels. So I'd be in the middle of things and my wheel would just fall off. Oops. Usually when I fall in my chair though, that's when like, usually I don't need help when I fall in my chair, but people do kind of realize that like if a wheelchair user falls, maybe we should do something. You should ask them first. Most of them probably, it depends on who they are. If they're like me, they don't want help. If they are not like me, they probably do. Most people, I don't want to say most people, I don't want to speak for wheelchair users who aren't me. Um, Full Injection says it must be mentally quite stressful slash draining. Oh my God. It takes so much energy. It just makes being out in public in the world take so much work for no good reason. Like, there is literally no good reason why it needs to be this much work. Willem adds in, and yet they dive at you even when you've gotten halfway sorted. Oh yeah, like, there have also been times where, like, the very first, oh, this is a great story. I mean, it's horrifying, but it's great. The very first time I ever took my scooter, my mobility scooter, on the bus. Mobility scooters and buses are a notoriously difficult pairing because the space that you have to turn around is basically, realistically, it's about 12 inches, like 30 centimeters, 12 inches shy in every direction of what would be the ideal turning dimensions for the device. So you're on a crowded bus and you have to turn a mobility scooter around. Like, you can't ride it facing backwards. It's just not a good idea. So you come on and you're facing backwards and you have to, like, go past and, like, actually, like, U-turn. Yeah. Full Injection says that we're talking Austin Powers U-turn levels of turning here. Basically, it's a 3-point turn. It's not quite a U-turn, but it's a 3-point turn, and it has to be executed with exceptional precision to not get stuck. There's a narrow point where you can end up wedged in between the window on one side, your scooter facing like perpendicular to the way that you're meant to go, and the seats on the other side of the bus on the other side, and especially if they're filled, then it's people's legs. And the very first time I ever took my scooter on a bus, I got stuck there. I just got wedged in and I could not move and I did not know what to do and I was panicking and, like, it was not good. Like, also note, that is the day that I drove into the door frame of my classroom when I finally got to school. I did not know what I was doing with this thing. No steering skills whatsoever. A whole bunch of men, without asking, somehow did, the, like, manly nod to each other. Like, I don't even know how this came together, but suddenly there were like 4 or 5 men around me and they just lifted me up in the scooter and turned it and sat it down in the spot where it was meant to be. And it is like one of the most terrifying things that have ever happened in my life. And I still, to this day, like years later, have no idea how they managed to coordinate themselves so quickly that, like, before I could even be like, no, don't do this, I was already up and over and down. Like, it was so weird. But it happened, and nobody even asked. They're just like, womp. Okay, that's one way of dealing with this, I guess. It was so bad. Wheelam says also, to make it extra hard, there are like 5 to 6 different bus variants, so good luck memorizing how to do things. Yeah, like, eventually you kind of get a sense for it, and you develop the proprioception to do it, but whew. And Willem says, having been stair-chaired by the fire department, I'm also boggled because it took so much prepping. Yeah, I don't know. Like, they literally... Oh, Full Injection says, crazy thing is I've seen that conglomeration of burly men lifting and turning stuff happen, but with a woman who had a flat tire and an old Mini Cooper car. I mean, truth be told, like, me and a mobility scooter and an old Mini Cooper probably weigh about the same. Like, how heavy can a Mini Cooper be? Certainly about the same as like a power chair, like an HD power chair with their user in it. Like, that's about 700-800 pounds. Oh man, which is the other thing too, right? Like, everywhere has these like wheelchair lifts to try and overcome stairs, and they're typically rated for 600 pounds, but like power chairs themselves can weigh like 400-500 pounds. It's ridiculous. Full Injection says, oh my god, lol. But, like, they just took a quarter and lifted this car up and off the road. Like, yep, no, it was exactly like that. It was just like, whoop, whoop. I'm like, okay, up, down, here you go. Don't know what just happened, but I'm on the bus now and now I can go home. It was on the way home. It was on the way home after I had driven my scooter into the door frame on my way into the classroom. The very first time that I used it, I was in undergrad. This was the very first time that my peers were ever going to see me use this mobility device, and like was nervous as anything. Ran it right into the door frame, but so badly that it took the metal off of, like, the metal door frame like broke. I was so embarrassed. So by the time the men lifted me up, I was just like resigned. I was like, okay, I guess this is what it's like now. This is how it's gonna be. People are gonna lift me up, apparently. People generally didn't lift me up and out of the way in my previous life before I started using mobility devices, but I guess I'm just a piece of public furniture now. And like, how many times do people like be like, can you take the wheelchair over to, like, especially in the train station, can you take the wheelchair over to the platform? I'm like, I'm a person, not a device. If you're gonna take a wheelchair over, like, there's nobody in it. Like, is there a person in it, or are you just gonna take the chair? I don't know. So, yeah, this was actually the story. A Mini Cooper is somewhere in the 3,000 or 1,361 kilogram range. Thank you for that, Wheelum. I'm glad to have a little bit of comparison. So, okay, if it's 3 times the weight, Full Ejection says, I mean, I have no physical disability and regularly walk into things to the point to get bruises that look like someone has beaten me. I mean, yup. I'm like, where are my bruises? I don't even know, but they'll show up eventually. I've been dancing. At some point, the bruises will come. Had a good fall when we were out in the park. That was good. Falls are excellent. I don't know, like, I genuinely think that if I'm not falling, I'm not trying things, so falls are good. It was a safe fall. It was, like, that's why it's exciting. Safe falls are exciting. Wheelam says, I was so glad we didn't have somebody walk by at that point. Yeah, well, like, we both went down at various points. We should post a fall video of, maybe not out of this one, but at some point we should make a fall compilation video. The fall the fall compilation video. Wheelchair dance is earned by falling. You earn your dance by falling. Dancing bales. Literally fall for dance. That's one of the festivals up here is fall for dance. So yes, we should satirically try and give them a compilation of falling videos and set it to some, like, I don't know, get a composer to create some excellent fall music for us. And I'm here for it. I'm here for weird dance videos. I'm here for weird dance. Let's make more of it. Hopefully, at some point, we will actually be able to edit together this footage. Hopefully, we will find the 4 to 5 hours to edit this stuff and make it into really nice video. Because there's some really nice stuff in it. Like, we're just getting back into what we're doing. We're very critical of ourselves, but there's some nice stuff worth sharing, stuff worth being like, hey, disability dance world, this is cool. I think dance is cool. More people should dance. That's your takeaway. If you take away nothing else, wheelchair users like to dance, and we should have more spaces where, even if you're not a professional dancer, you can dance in public, because everybody deserves to dance in public. That's really the takeaway. Everybody deserves to dance in public. Let's build public spaces where everybody can dance in public and feel safe to do so. And dancing in the trees and nature is something that we've all, wanted to do since pagan religions thousands of years ago. So, maybe just because we're disabled doesn't mean that we don't want to dance around maypoles and do, forest things, forest frolicking as well. Forest bathing for disabled people, for real. Pave your paths, because I promise you that if you're already building a path, that you're disturbing the nature enough that that it being paved versus, we're already bringing in material, like man-made materials into places too. Like we build bridges, we build staircases, we build all of these, like there is built environment on these paths. It's not a big deal to make the built environment accessible that we're building. It doesn't take away from it being a hike just because it's not a dirt path. And Fool Injection says, my wheelchair user eye-opener was seeing wheelchair rugby and how incredible those players are and how brutal that sport is. Oh yeah, it's called murder ball. Like, the disability community calls it murder ball. For good reason. For good reason. I have no desire to lose my fingers to murder ball. It's pretty common. Like, it's not like the most common thing in the world that wheelchair rugby people lose their fingers, but like it happens, like for real. Fool Injection says, yeah, I had heard that. That's nuts. Yeah. And like sometimes in wheelchair basketball too, just because of the way that push rims get like locked up against each other, that's where the real risk is in push rims getting locked up. It's a thing. It's a thing. Anyway, we have hit an hour of streaming. It's the hockey. Fool Injection says it's the hockey equivalent of losing some teeth, taking a puck to the face. I mean, also, sledge hockey injuries are gnarly too. Like, I straight up dislocated my whole right shoulder going over in sledge hockey a couple of years ago. It's finally like mostly a normal shoulder again, but it took a lot of rehab and a long time. Parasport is badass and it's so much fun, and we need to like absolutely see more of it all over the place. Whaleb says, lol, I sledged once and managed to stab myself in the legs multiple times. Yup. Yeah, parasport is violent in like the best way possible, because so much of the time it's the only place where disabled people are actually allowed to take risk. Eventually we'll actually talk about disability and risk taking. That's not what we're talking about on Sunday. On Sunday we are talking about the Canada Disability Benefit and median incomes and all of those things. But at some point we are going to talk about disability and risk, because disabled people are not allowed to take risk in so many places in their life. Willem says, the propulsion mechanism is sharp bits on the top of the sticks, and I'm a klutz. Fool Injection says, thankfully here in the UK, Channel 4 is a massive advocate for parasport. They show the Paralympics each time it's ran, and the coverage is so good. Yeah, but Paralympics, like, one day we will unpack the Paralympics. One day we will unpack the Paralympics. I'm glad that there's good coverage. Paralympic athletes like deserve good coverage and deserve equitable coverage and deserve equitable funding and awards and all of the things that they do not have. And so we will be on the record about supporting parasport. And also, like Willem says, I have so many feelings about the IPC. Disability is the wildest thing. Not all disabilities are equal, and Paralympics are one of the places where not all disabilities are equal comes really into the forefront. There are some places where as a disabled person, diagnosis doesn't matter and functioning is the way that things are measured. IPC, not one of those places, which is a big problem for a lot of people, particularly with barriers to diagnosis. We could go on if people keep talking about this. The stream will be another hour. Fool Injection says, did I hit into something that I'm about to get an education on? Another time, I think. I think we will save talking about parasport and like access to that for another time. There's so like, it's all nuanced, right? Like it's not simply good. It's not simply bad. It's complicated. And at the end of the day, like one of the biggest reasons why it's not better is because it's so underfunded that people can't access it. Because I think that things would change if the barrier to entry was not so absurdly high, and gets back to exactly what we're talking about who is responsible for paying for all of this extra equipment that disabled people need to do everything, because rather than make things accessible, everything requires specialized equipment that disabled people have to pay for. And once you move past that, Like, once you understand why that's a problem, the whole thing starts to fall apart because it becomes clear that it's, a place where certain people have access, certain people don't. And everyone deserves access to sport and recreation. And it's so complicated. Anyway, Fool Injection says I'm here for it when it happens. Thank you all for, this was actually quite enjoyable and quite lovely. And I'm really glad that we did not get crashed by folks trolling us again tonight. Happy that the new moderation tools seem to be helping. We'll be back on Sunday. We're going to talk about the Canada Disability Benefit, and that's going to be a time. Just the TLDR is disabled people need to live, and $200 a month is not going to fix the problems. Shocker. Anyway, yay, budget season. Have a wonderful night. We'll be back on Sunday, and I'm looking forward to seeing you then. Take care.